This is a true story. The Titanic, the ship of the century, sank into the depths of the North Atlantic Ocean in 1912. 84 years later, a treasure hunting team set out to find the legendary super diamond known as the heart of the ocean. They spent a fortune searching for the wreckage, but when they opened the safe, they were stunned to find nothing but a sketchbook. As they cleaned the sketchbook, a beautiful nude drawing slowly emerged. Here's a little Easter egg. If you type "dog head domestic violence dog" in the comments, you can unlock a new emoji. Soon after, an elderly woman contacted the expedition team. The woman featured in the news reports was herself decades earlier. The team immediately invited the elderly lady to join them, pinning all their hopes of finding the diamond on her. As she saw the drawing of her younger self, memories long sealed away began to surface. It was the largest and most luxurious cruise ship of the early 20th century. The innocent and carefree Rose boarded the ship with her wealthy fiancé, ready to start a new life in America. Meanwhile, in a nearby casino, a poor artist named Jack won a ticket for the Titanic at the last moment and stepped onto the grand ship just as it was about to depart. The ship carried not only impoverished passengers like Jack, but also many affluent businessmen. As the propellers began to spin, the Titanic set off across the Atlantic. Jack stood on the deck, awestruck by the majestic scenery before him. In another part of the ship, Rose, surrounded by her mother and the aristocracy, felt like a commodity meant to secure her mother's lifestyle. Despite her best efforts to express her dissatisfaction, her mother remained indifferent to her feelings. Rose had had enough of the braggarts at the dinner party and went outside to enjoy the sea breeze. Her graceful silhouette captivated Jack, who saw her as an angel. After dinner, Rose felt increasingly angry about marrying a man she didn't love and living a life she didn't want, just to be her mother's financial tool. In her frustration, she ran to the deck, climbed over the railing, and prepared to end her life. Coincidentally, Jack, who was stargazing nearby, approached her saying, "You jump, I jump," and managed to pull her back from the brink, even though she slipped and nearly fell into the freezing water. Hearing the commotion, a sailor rushed over and, seeing the scene, mistakenly thought Jack was a pervert and cuffed him. Thankfully, Rose explained the situation, and together they concocted a story about almost falling overboard. Jack was saved, but Rose's fiancé, Cal, condescendingly gave him $20 as a token of gratitude. Rose, feeling insulted, questioned the value of her life being worth just $20. Cal, filled with jealousy, invited Jack to dinner, hoping to humiliate him. To impress his fiancée, Cal adorned Rose with the heart of the ocean and made some bitter vows, not knowing the tragedy that awaited. The next day, Rose went to the lower decks to thank Jack, and the two of them admired Jack's artwork together. Rose was fascinated by Jack's talent, and they connected instantly, spending the entire day talking without any awkwardness. Rose preferred Jack's genuine and free-spirited life over the pretentiousness of the aristocracy until they were caught by her mother. Dinner time arrived quickly. Jack, dressed in borrowed clothes, looked exceptionally handsome. Rose introduced him to the upper-class members and shared their scandals. Her mother couldn't stop humiliating Jack, but he remained unfazed and proudly revealed his true identity. Cal continued the insults, but Jack's cheerful demeanor left him speechless. After dinner, Jack and Rose snuck down to the third-class decks, where Jack experienced true happiness for the first time. Despite their lack of wealth, these people genuinely enjoyed life. Rose's natural dancing ability allowed her to blend in seamlessly. However, the good times didn't last long. Cal's henchmen found them and exaggerated the situation to Cal, who became furious and overturned a table in rage. Rose was terrified and trembling, even collapsing to the ground. During a brief moment alone, her mother pressured her to marry Cal, reminding her of their debts and the need for a wealthy life. Rose felt helpless, but was already deeply in love with Jack. They went to the deck again, where Jack took Rose's hand and asked her to close her eyes. The classic scene unfolded as they stood at the bow of the ship. They later went to Rose's room, where she removed her constraints, wore the heart of the ocean, and asked Jack to draw her. Just as the sketch was finished, Cal's henchmen found them again, leading to a chase that ended in a luxurious car in the cargo hold. There, they consummated their love. As they made their way back to the deck, Rose promised to run away with Jack after disembarking. Just as they were embracing, the ship struck an iceberg. Water poured into the hull, but the passengers were still unaware of the impending disaster. Jack and Rose witnessed everything and overheard the crew's conversations, realizing the severity of the situation. They rushed to warn their families, but Cal framed Jack for theft and had him locked up. The ship's designer reported the inevitable disaster to the captain. As the water filled the compartments, it would exceed the Titanic's capacity, leading to its eventual sinking. With only 2 hours left to save the 2,000 passengers, the lifeboats could only accommodate less than half. The distress signals were sent out, but the nearest ship was still 4 hours away. Evacuation began in an orderly manner, with the wealthy in the first-class cabins prioritized for lifeboats while the poor were locked below decks to face their fate. Even in this dire situation, Rose's mother continued to insult the poor, prompting Rose to reprimand her. As many lives were at stake in the cold waters, Cal dismissed them as mere poor people. Rose, disillusioned with him, spat in his face and ran to find Jack, who was being subjected to a death sentence. Worse, Cal's henchman had taken the handcuff key and left. Desperately, Rose searched the lower decks, and after numerous attempts, finally reunited with Jack. Without the key, they couldn't unlock the handcuffs. Rose sought help, but in such a chaotic situation, no one cared about others' lives. In a moment of clarity, Rose grabbed a firefighter's axe, braved the dangerous waters, and freed Jack from the handcuffs. They struggled through the flooding compartments, encountering barriers and fighting for survival. They finally reached the deck, but all the lifeboats were gone. Cal, in a moment of generosity, secured a spot for Rose on a lifeboat, but she couldn't leave Jack behind. She leaped back onto the ship, and the two embraced once more. Cal, determined to kill them, chased them down to the lower decks. They found themselves locked behind another gate in the lower decks, but a frightened crew member, seeing their desperation, unlocked it. After battling through the flooded corridors, they reached the deck just as the ship's stern began to rise out of the water. The Titanic broke apart, with the stern towering vertically before sinking. Jack and Rose clung to the highest point of the ship, taking a deep breath before plunging into the icy waters. Miraculously, they survived and found a piece of debris. Jack helped Rose onto it, but remained in the water himself. Minutes passed, and most people succumbed to the freezing temperatures. Jack, with his last breath, urged Rose to live a long, full life, fulfilling the dreams they had shared. Eventually, a lifeboat returned to search for survivors, but by then, the scene was eerily silent. Rose, heartbroken, pushed Jack's frozen body away, swam to a whistle, and was rescued. After the tragedy, Cal searched for Rose but never found her again. She took on Jack's last name, fulfilling his dreams by traveling, riding horses, and living life to the fullest. Decades later, she returned to the site of their meeting and dropped the heart of the ocean into the sea, reuniting with Jack in spirit. According to statistics, over 1,500 people were lost when the Titanic sank, and only 6 were rescued by returning lifeboats. This story, immortalized in a globally acclaimed film, won numerous awards and became the first to break the billion-dollar mark at the box office. It remains one of the top-ranked films of all time. My recount can't do it justice, so if you have time, watch the original movie. Its nearly 4-hour runtime is worth every minute.